At exactly 4:12 in the afternoon, the heavy brass house keys slid off the kitchen counter and hit the hardwood floor with a sharp, metallic crash. Clara froze in the doorway of her bedroom, watching in absolute disbelief. Her massive Maine Coon cat, Jasper, held the leather keychain tightly in his jaws. He did not run to his toy basket. He did not hide under the sofa. Instead, he dragged the heavy keys straight down the narrow hallway toward the vintage iron radiator grate set deep into the floorboards. When he reached the dark slatted iron, he opened his mouth and let the keys fall. A hollow, echoing clatter rang out as the metal disappeared into the black abyss below. But Jasper did not walk away. He immediately flattened his massive, furry body directly over the cold iron grate, closed his eyes, and began to purr with a rumbling intensity that vibrated through the floor. And then came the sound that made the blood freeze in Clara's veins. From deep down in the pitch-black ventilation shaft, far beneath the floorboards, a weak, rhythmic tapping echoed back up. 3 slow knocks against metal. Someone or something was trapped in the darkness beneath her home, and her cat was communicating with it. Clara Vance was a 34-year-old historical archivist who spent her days surrounded by fragile paper and absolute silence at the downtown Boston Public Library. Silence had recently become a much larger part of her life than she ever wanted. 6 months ago, a severe viral infection had permanently destroyed the hearing in her left ear, leaving her world unbalanced and muted. Struggling to adjust, Clara had retreated from her bustling social life. She moved into a quiet, historic brownstone apartment, actively avoiding crowded spaces, loud streets, and complex human interactions. Her only companion in this self-imposed isolation was Jasper. Jasper was a remarkably large Maine Coon mix, identifiable by a unique split-colored nose that was perfectly half pink and half black. Clara had adopted him from a local shelter shortly after her hearing loss. Usually, Jasper was an incredibly gentle, clumsy giant who spent his days sleeping heavily on the windowsill, watching the freezing November wind strip the leaves from the Boston elm trees. He was never destructive. He never stole things. He was the perfect, peaceful roommate for a woman trying to hide from the noisy world. But ever since the massive winter blizzard had buried the city in 3 feet of snow 4 days ago, Jasper's peaceful demeanor had completely vanished. The strange key-dropping incident was not an isolated event. It repeated the very next afternoon with disturbing precision. Clara had intentionally placed her spare set of keys inside a ceramic bowl on the high dining table. At exactly 4:12, she felt the vibrations of Jasper jumping onto the table. By the time she turned around, he was already trotting down the hallway, the spare keys firmly in his mouth. He dropped them down the exact same iron grate, flattened his body over the metal, and began his deafening purr. Clara rushed over and pressed her good ear toward the floor. Once again, from the deep, freezing darkness, came 3 weak, metallic taps. By the 3rd day, the behavior escalated into pure frenzy. Clara had locked all her keys inside a wooden drawer. When 4:12 arrived, Jasper paced the hallway, letting out deep, distressed yowls. Finding no keys, he ran to the kitchen, grabbed a heavy silver soup spoon by its handle, and dropped that down the grate instead. He refused to move from the iron slats to eat his dinner. He refused to sleep in Clara's bed. He simply lay over the cold metal grate all night, staring intensely at the gaps, his split-colored nose twitching in the freezing draft that blew up from the sub-basement. Clara stopped sleeping. She paced the living room, her anxiety spiking, entirely consumed by the terrifying mystery of what was hiding beneath her feet. Desperate for a logical explanation, Clara tried everything she could think of to stop the unsettling behavior. Her first theory was simple pest control. She assumed the old brownstone had a rat infestation in the heating ducts, and Jasper was using the metal objects to hunt or scare them. She called a professional exterminator, who spent an hour inspecting the basement levels with a bright flashlight. He found absolutely no droppings, no nests, and no signs of rodents anywhere. Her second theory was that the sudden temperature drop from the blizzard had caused a malfunction in the old boiler system, and Jasper was reacting to a strange hissing sound she could not hear. She called her landlord to check the radiator pipes, but the mechanic declared everything was working perfectly. Thinking Jasper was simply bored and acting out due to being cooped up during the long snowstorm, Clara bought expensive interactive puzzle toys and premium catnip. Jasper completely ignored them. She tried placing heavy books over the iron grate to block his access. Jasper spent 3 hours methodically pushing the heavy books away with his massive paws until the grate was exposed again. Nothing could deter him. Whatever was happening down in that dark shaft, Jasper considered it the most important mission of his life. But on the late afternoon of the 5th day, Clara finally saw something that completely shattered her logical theories. She had crawled onto the floor with a heavy tactical flashlight, shining the bright beam straight down through the narrow iron slats. And as the light pierced the dusty darkness, her hands turned ice cold. Before we continue uncovering this incredible mystery, if you enjoy suspenseful and heartwarming stories like this, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It gives me the motivation to keep bringing you these deeply emotional tales. Down in the black void of the shaft, resting on a pile of broken concrete about 10 feet below the floor, Clara did not just see her dropped keys and the silver spoon. She saw a piece of fabric. It was not a dirty rag or discarded insulation. It was a brightly colored piece of knitted red wool. Clara stared at it, her heart hammering violently against her ribs. She recognized that specific shade of red. She had seen it every morning for the past year. Driven by a sudden, frantic need for answers, Clara rushed to her laptop. Because she worked as a historical archivist, she had digital access to the original architectural blueprints of the historic Boston brownstones. She rapidly typed in her address and pulled up the century-old schematics. Tracing the lines with a trembling finger, she discovered a forgotten structural detail. The iron grate in her hallway was not a standard heating vent. It was the top of an old, vertical coal chute that connected down into a sealed horizontal subbasement, and that narrow subbasement ran directly horizontally beneath the brick dividing wall, connecting the dark space under her floor to the adjacent apartment unit next door. The adjacent unit belonged to Arthur Pendleton. Arthur was an 82-year-old retired watchmaker who lived entirely alone. He was a sweet, frail man who always wore a brightly colored, hand-knitted red woolen scarf when he checked his mail. But Arthur was not safely inside his apartment. 4 days ago, right as the massive blizzard hit the city, the local news had broadcasted an urgent missing person alert. The police believed that Arthur, who suffered from mild confusion, had wandered out into the freezing snowstorm and gotten lost in the whiteout conditions. The entire neighborhood had been searching the snowy streets for days, assuming the absolute worst. But as Clara stared at the historical blueprints, a horrifying realization began to form in her mind. Arthur had never wandered out into the freezing storm. The sub-basement beneath their buildings was completely sealed off from the outside, but it was directly accessible through the ancient, rotting wooden floorboards of Arthur's living room. Jasper was not dropping keys to play a game. He was not hunting rats. He was actively communicating with the dark, freezing space where the old man with the red scarf had vanished. Clara ran to the hallway grate, fell to her knees, and began desperately unscrewing the rusted bolts that held the heavy iron cover in place. It took 10 agonizing minutes of straining and pulling before the heavy iron lifted free. A blast of freezing, damp air rushed up from the dark hole. Clara grabbed her flashlight and leaned her head into the narrow opening. "Arthur!" she screamed into the darkness, her voice cracking with terror. "Mr. Pendleton, are you down there?" For a long, terrifying moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind howling outside the building. Then, from the pitch-black depths of the abandoned coal tunnel, a weak, raspy, and trembling voice floated up. "Help me," the voice whispered. "It is so cold," Clara gasped, tears instantly streaming down her face. Arthur was there. He had fallen through a collapsed section of his own living room floor during the height of the storm, dropping deep into the forgotten utility space beneath the buildings. Because the storm had knocked out the power and the roaring wind had drowned out all external noise, No one had heard his cries for help. Furthermore, he had dragged himself through the tunnel, trying to find a way out, until he ended up directly beneath Clara's hallway vent. But as Clara looked down at her cat, the final, most profound twist of the story hit her with the force of a physical blow. Arthur had been trapped directly under her feet for 4 agonizing days, calling out for help. But Clara was partially deaf. With her severe hearing loss in her left ear, she had been walking back and forth over that grate, entirely incapable of hearing the old man's weak, fading voice. She could not hear his cries, but Jasper could. The massive cat had heard the old man pleading in the dark. Realizing that his human owner could not hear the sounds, Jasper had devised a brilliant, desperate plan. He knew Clara could feel heavy vibrations, so he stole the heaviest brass keys and metal spoons he could find, dropping them straight down the metal chute to create a loud, vibrating clatter that Clara's body would physically register. And he always did it exactly at 4:12 in the afternoon, because that was the exact time Clara returned home from her library shift, taking her boots off in the silent hallway. Furthermore, Jasper had flattened his massive, furry body over the freezing iron grate for days, not because he was crazy, but because he was projecting his loud, rumbling purrs down the acoustic chute. He was using the deep frequency of his purring to comfort the terrified, freezing old man in the pitch-black dark, telling him that he was not alone, that someone was standing guard right above him. Clara buried her face in Jasper's thick fur, sobbing uncontrollably. "You saved him?" she wept, kissing the cat's split-colored nose. "You tried so hard to tell me, and you saved him." Clara did not waste another second. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Within 10 minutes, the quiet street was filled with the flashing red and blue lights of emergency vehicles. Firefighters rushed into Clara's apartment with heavy axes and ropes. They had to widen the floor opening, working frantically against the clock as Arthur's condition was critical. Clara stood in the corner of the hallway, clutching Jasper tightly to her chest, her heart in her throat. She had spent months hiding from the noisy, chaotic world, but now she forced herself to stand strong amidst the shouting rescue workers and the screaming sirens. Finally, a firefighter emerged from the dark hole, carrying the frail, shivering body of Arthur Pendleton. The old man was severely hypothermic, dehydrated, and covered in coal dust, but he was breathing. As the paramedics strapped him to the stretcher, Arthur slowly turned his head. His cloudy eyes found Clara, and then they moved down to the massive, fluffy cat in her arms. With a trembling, soot-covered hand, Arthur reached out. Jasper leaned forward and gently bumped his split-colored nose against the old man's cold fingers. "Thank you for the music," Arthur whispered faintly to the cat. "Your song kept me awake. Your song kept me alive." Clara rode in the back of the loud ambulance, stepping completely out of her comfort zone, holding the old man's hand all the way to the emergency room. 3 weeks later, the brutal winter snow finally began to melt, leaving the Boston streets washed in bright, crisp sunlight. Arthur had survived the terrifying ordeal. After spending a week in the intensive care unit recovering from severe exposure, he was transferred to a bright, warm rehabilitation center on the ground floor of a nearby medical facility. He was no longer living in the dangerous, drafty brownstone. Clara's life had also fundamentally transformed. The terrifying night had forcefully broken her out of her self-imposed shell of isolation. She realized that hiding from the world out of fear of what she had lost was preventing her from experiencing the beautiful things she still had. She began interacting with her neighbors, sharing the incredible story of the rescue, and finding that people were far more understanding of her hearing loss than she had ever imagined. The heavy, oppressive silence of her apartment was gone, replaced by a profound sense of purpose and connection. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Clara walked into Arthur's sunny rehabilitation room. Jasper was walking proudly by her side, wearing a red harness. The massive Maine Coon immediately jumped onto the foot of Arthur's hospital bed, circled twice, and settled down, releasing a loud, familiar purr. Arthur smiled brightly. His color completely returned to his cheeks. He reached into the pocket of his cardigan sweater and pulled out a single heavy brass key attached to a leather keychain. It was the exact key Jasper had dropped down the chute. Arthur had asked the firefighters to retrieve it from the rubble, keeping it as a permanent lucky charm. He gently tapped the brass key against the metal bed frame. 3 slow knocks. Jasper's ears twitched, and the cat slowly blinked his green eyes in quiet acknowledgement. Clara sat in the chair beside them, watching the sunlight catch the brass key. She realized that miracles do not always come with loud trumpets or dramatic announcements. Sometimes, the most profound love and salvation do not come from those who can shout the loudest. They arrive on 4 quiet paws, speaking a language of pure devotion, proving that even when the world seems impossibly dark and silent, a true hero will never stop trying to make you hear them. If this story of Jasper's incredible intuition and loyalty touched your heart, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel to hear more warm, inspiring stories that celebrate the beautiful bond between humans and animals.